So this is Trevor Lynn, everybody, but before we get going, and obviously you can take a seat here, but I'd like to introduce myself, and for those of you who have been to a few of our events, thank you for indulging as I give a little bit of a standard template of an intro, but my name's Kevin O'Connell. I'm the founder of the Niche Movement, and this, as I was telling a couple of you that I got a chance to talk to before the event started, this was a passion project, a blog, if you will, back in 2013, that I just saw something different in career exploration, specifically with college students graduating and hating their life upon graduation, hitting the real world. And over the last 4 years, we've grown to a contributing editor base of 30 contributing editors that write for our blog across the country and some corners of the world. We do events like this now where we broke a traditional 2-day conference model, and now we're doing these intimate fireside chat interviews, which we'll get to learn a little bit more about Trevor, who's, by the way, a 26-year-old CMO of a startup, which I thought he was 30, to be honest, at least. But so you look a little bit older than you are. But the other couple things that we do is, aside from the event piece, it's all about putting out practical resources and advice to college students and young professionals to help them rethink their career search or find a job that they love. And it's all about breaking this traditional career model of a resume or a career fair. And we do that through these events, through workshops and trainings and some speaking. And I was very fortunate enough to self-publish a book where we interviewed 30 different young professionals that went all different routes, from traditional corporate setting to then working for themselves, all the way to working in a consulting firm, to then working for a brewery, all these crazy stories. And we've put that together into the new rules of finding a career you love. And I think the best thing that I'm very proud of is that we've had the support of our sponsors to allow us to do this, where we can travel over the next year. We are based in DC, but we're allowed to travel between here and Boston and do these 2-hour events. And so we have college students in the crowd, we have people at all different parts of their career spectrum. And so without further ado, I'd like to interview and welcome Trevor Lynn, but give it up for Trevor. Thank you for being here tonight. So I think the best thing that we can do tonight is obviously speak to the crowd. Obviously, it's being live streamed and recorded, but I think everybody came here for a different reason. The DC tech scene, the fact that you're a CMO, the social tables piece. But before I get kicked off, and I really love asking this question, is what was your very first job?
And
how old were you?
I originally grew up in Ohio, so I'm not from around here. I'm from like a really small country farm town. So my first job, I feel like it was just, I didn't get paid for a lot of my first jobs. It was like your friend's grandpa needed like lawn taken care of, and then like eventually you get old enough to be like, wait a second, I'm supposed to get paid for this. So like I feel like my first job was like manual labor, like baling hay. Like the first time I got paid $100 to bale hay for like 13 hours one time.
Probably thought you were
and I was rich, like, holy cow, that's amazing. Yeah. So that was my first job.
Cool. And so then we're gonna fast forward. How did you get this job at startups? And for anybody that knows a little bit about the DC tech scene and startups and social tables, it's blowing up basically. But how did you get this job at Social Tables?
Yeah, so cold email. It probably should. A lot of jobs might seem or sound more nuanced than that, or you get like an introduction for someone, or you know someone, or you're well connected, or there's this perfect path where you apply online. I think startups are a little bit different because at the stage that I joined Social Tables, which was we had our founder, we had a few part-time people, and then a few people working full-time. So I was maybe like the 4th or 5th full-time person on the team. And at that point, like there is no application for the website. It's just like you have to find someone's email. And you kind of have to make a pitch for why they should even think about, they have very little money in a startup. In a software company, you maybe have some seed funding. And so you have to kind of pitch like, why is it worth your salary, whatever small salary you're probably gonna ask for to make that happen. So it was a cold email intro to the CEO. And I did the same exact template email to like 45 startup CEOs. And I got lucky, so I had a handful of people that were like, hey, yeah, come by the office, let's chat. It's a pretty informal process. So it was really just cold emails.
And so what year ago was that? And so you mentioned you were like employee number 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah. So that was 2012. So I started August 2012. And it was, it was tough for me because I was coming right out of school. I had worked at Living Social as an intern, but I was trying to get a full-time job. And you're trying to get a full-time job at a startup, and you basically have 0 applicable skills that they need. Because, right, they just need people to write code, and they need users to get to the website. So for me, it was just about how do I position myself as like, I will get people to the website. Like I will figure out, no matter if I'm like going door to door, if I'm picking up the phone, if I'm doing cold emails to not CEOs of companies, but actual people, or if I'm doing like paid advertising, social, I was just on board and I was like, that'll be what I do. And like, give me a shot. Kind of like mentally knowing if I didn't do that great in 3 months, maybe I wouldn't have a job. I don't know. So it was kind of how it worked.
So I always like going these a little bit cold and not knowing what direction is, but at the same time I like getting super practical.
Sure.
Do you remember what that email said? And what the response was, or basically kind of to give some practical advice to those out there that should do something like that? What did you say? What was your pitch?
Yeah, so it was bad because it was a really long email. So I learned a little bit about...
So why is that bad?
I learned a little bit about email marketing through learning marketing at Social Tables. So it was like way too much information. Like nobody wants to read that. Like you just have to communicate in like 4 sentences or less why they should at least respond. Like you're not trying to like get the job with the email. You're trying to like start a conversation. And I think a lot of people forget about that for smaller companies or companies like I would say less than 100 employees. Someone's going to get your information. And so thinking about it that way, like you're just trying to get them to agree to like a next conversation. Like I think of it as like in sales, we would call it like a micro commit. So like if you give them a little bit of information that you think is like really pertinent and then ask a follow-up question, like, you know, is that something like whatever you say? And then it's like, is that something your team's looking for right now? Or like, is that something that you guys might be interested in? Or like, is that something I could help out with in the short term? Or like, would you like to chat about that? Like really short. And then they're at least probably going to say like yes or no. And then at the very least, you know, like yes or no.
And did you do that or no? You sent like a novel?
I sent a novel. I sent way too much information. It was. I actually to this day, our CEO, like during company meetings, he will read that email out loud to embarrass me. And it's really fun. I love it. And but it was a long email.
All right, cool. So let's keep going. How did you discover Social Tables? And then so 3-part question. How did you discover it?
Yeah.
What then intrigued you other than you were graduating, you needed a job? Yeah. What intrigued you about Social Tables? Then 2, how did you kind of do some professional stalking that I like to call it that you were able to get? I'm assuming it's Dan's email?
Spelled Dan, pronounced Don.
Okay, but you were able to get his email.
Okay, so run those 3 back for me again.
All right, so how did you discover Social Tables? What made you intrigued to do that? And then how did you find his email and have the audacity to do that?
Perfect. Okay. So I think one of the things that I did do right when it came to looking for a new job that I think as I'm interviewing people at Social Tables, so Social Tables is about 120 people now. I've probably interviewed, 1,000 people. And through that process, I think the one thing that I've learned is that when you're kind of initially looking for a role or looking for a company, it's really important that you understand the dynamic of not only the business model, but the size of the business. So I think one of the things that I did do right is I wanted to work at a software company. I wanted to work at a software company that had aspirations to grow really quickly. And I wanted to work in a software company that had I was looking for fewer than 10 employees because I knew how impactful those first 10 employees are. And if you can get in the first 10 employees, you have unbelievable ability to impact the trajectory. Does that startup live or die? What industry does it go into? What customers does it get? And so I think if my word of advice for people, if you're looking for that role, is really understand okay, a company with less than 10 people, what does that look like? It looks like a mess. There's no processes, there's no systems. You have no guidance. You have no mentorship. You have no resources. You have to want to do that. Or you might say to yourself, actually, I do really well when I have a little more structure. Or maybe I'm coming into my role and I want some mentorship, so I should go to a bigger place. I think there's these little elements of the size of the company that dictates where you should look. And then I think also the business model. So if it's a business to business, right? And you want to be on a marketing team and you're going to tell me that you love brand marketing for a business to business software company, I'm going to tell you wait until they get 3,000 employees because brand marketing doesn't really exist for B2B. It's mainly lead generation. So you have to understand okay, well, how does my department change as the size of the company changes and as the industry changes? So I think the perfect mix, honestly, is you should try to care about the type of customers that they serve. Because if you're not passionate about your business's customers, it's really hard to get excited about what you do. And then also just make sure the size of the business fits your profile of the type of person you are. If you're the type of person that kind of likes to pave your own path, figure things out on your own, smaller companies are going to be way better. If you like to wear lots of hats, do lots of different things. that's not for everyone. But if you want to have a little more structure, have a little bit more defined career path, bigger companies are better. So I think that's what I kind of did well when I was looking. So Social Tables at the time was very small, had just gotten seed funding. So I knew that, fingers crossed, they could pay like a little bit of salary. And so really, why did I pick Social Tables at that point? You're right, I needed a job. That was a big part of it. But also I had done a little bit of due diligence around town. So when I would go meet with other CEOs, I would ask them like, who else in the startup scene is doing really well right now? Obviously, like whoever I was talking to, it's like, obviously you're doing really well. Who else is doing really well? And I think the company that got named the most amount of times, other than the company that I was at, was Social Tables. So I think people really believed in the founder and thought that he was going to do a great job, and that was a good person to work with. So I thought that was a really good indicator that, like, okay, if all the other startups keep naming the same startup, they're probably doing something right.
That's a great question and tactic, I think, for many people, whether you're just graduating or in the kind of the networking side of kind of create a tally of what companies or what people are being mentioned. So how did you find Don's email?
Well, up until probably like, no joke, probably like a year ago, if you emailed hello@Social Tables, it went straight to him. So we had like 4,000 customers and like 120 employees, and like he's still getting like the hello inbox. So that was like on the website, hello@Social Tables, and I just fired off my cold email there.
Very cool. So you got to kind of take that risk of like whether it's info@ or hello@, like it may be going to the founder or somebody pretty high up.
Yeah, at a small company, there's a really good chance, and like no harm in starting really high on a totem pole. I think people that are hiring and recruiting, they always know like the most important thing that they can be doing is building a really strong team in their whole company. So even if they, like, you're on LinkedIn, you reach out to someone, they're really high up on the marketing team, and they might say, well, I'm actually not hiring, but this person looks smart, I'll send them to my recruiting team, right? So there's really no harm in reaching out to multiple people on LinkedIn. There's no harm in reaching out multiple people via email. Ask for multiple introductions. I can guarantee you, if you get a friend of a friend to introduce you, that person on the other end feels really obligated to at least respond to your email, which is 10 times better than the no response, which I think kills everybody. Yeah. So I would say just full blast, go for it.
Cool. And the last part for this piece, he got right back to you, or did you have to send a follow-up?
He is unbelievably fast at responding to things. So like if you tweet at Don Berger right now, he'll probably respond really quickly if you want to try it out. So he's really good at responding, and he responded quickly, set up coffee. At that point, I kind of came in for like a test period. So they wanted to see like what I could do, how I gelled with the team. The team dynamic at a small company like that's really important. So I did a little bit of a test run, and then got an offer and went from there.
And so what was your title on paper?
Oh man, this is as bad as my cold email. So at a startup, you can kind of pick what you want to do and what your title is. So my initial title was, it was like strategic partnerships and something else. Like there were no strategic partnerships, but I thought that's what I was going to do. And then quickly realized like,
it was
that's
fancy,
not what
right?
I'm going to do. Yeah. I was like, this sounds, because I had to get a little credibility. I was relatively young, so I reach out and they're like, what is this person doing? So I thought strategic partnerships might help. But yeah, so my job was, we had a lot of people building the software. My job was, what can we do to get users to the website? Is it social? Is it SEO? Is it paid search? What is it going to take? Email marketing, and just really start to get people in the door so we can learn, is this a viable business or not?
And so now so you started as probably a department of one?
Yeah.
And so over the last 3 to 4 years, what's your team look like?
Sure. So the marketing team is 5 people, and then I also run our sales and customer success teams, and that's about 60 people in total. So in total, my team is about 65.
Cool. And what does, for some of those that are out there curious about Social Tables, what is Social Tables?
Sure. So Social Tables, we're a web-based software. We are in the hospitality, meetings, and events world. So if you think about any conference you've been to, there's some technology that Social Tables has that's probably touched that event. So we do things, we're most well known for what we do, which is like a room set design tool. So you can imagine when you set up a conference and you have trade show booths, or you have seating arrangements, you have a gala, you need to understand, where's the stage go, where's the AV, where's the lighting, where are the tables. We help people do that in the cloud really collaboratively. And we do a host of other things as well. We have a proposal product, we have a product, a website, hotels put on their website to generate leads, but we really stay within our vertical focus we're really dedicated to that industry because we think it's really big.
Cool. So let's go back. You said you spent some time around here. So you went to American University. There's some American University students in the crowd here that I know of. Talk to me about your decision to go from Ohio to DC. Those couple of years at American University, were there ups, downs, adversity, risks that you took? What was that experience, that college life experience like?
Sure. So I think I grew up in Ohio, a small rural farm town. I think that's a great place to grow up, not a great place to grow once you grow up. So I wanted to get into a world where there's like a little bit more, like diversity, a little more interesting, like businesses. Like growing up, I didn't know a single person that had like a business job. I didn't know what like a business job was. Like small businesses or like farmers. Like you either ran the candy store or you had a cornfield. So that to me, I was like, oh, I don't even know what this is. I got a degree in finance, had no idea what a degree in finance was, like what I would really do with that. I thought I was going to go into finance, and I didn't like the idea that finance was like, you look at these like charts and numbers and you look at companies like they're these little dots, and you have this portfolio of little dots, and like those little dots are actually companies with maybe like tens of thousands of employees and like millions of customers. And I just thought that like boiling it down like a dot on a graph was really bad. So I wanted to like be inside one of those dots, I guess you could say, and be a part of a company. And DC was, New York's too big, Boston's too cold, Chicago's too cold, Miami's not probably my city, but DC seemed like a great fit. And I think DC's amazing because people don't realize that every business has something here, has one person, one representative, every part of every industry, someone is here in DC, and I think that's really amazing. And I think one of the things that American University did a really great job was pushing people to get internships. So I worked at Affinity Lab, which was one of the original co-working spaces before like WeWork was a thing, and that was a ton of fun. I got to see, so it was basically like, you can imagine people come off the hill and they start building like they do here at WeWork. They come off the hill, they take off their tie, and they start building this company until midnight. And I was like, these people are nuts. I want to be one of these people. So I was really watching these people grow these companies, and then Living Social started to take off around DC. So they were one of the bigger kind of tech companies that they really scaled massively and got a huge amount of funding from multiple people, including Amazon. And I was lucky enough to get an internship there, and I had a great experience where I could apply my financial knowledge to help see how they're scaling that. So I think maybe when I was there, they went from like 1,000-ish employees to like 5,000 employees, like globally, which was unbelievable to watch. And so I was like, wow, I was at Affinity Lab. I got to see all these really small businesses trying to grow and be this massive Living Social, and I got a ton of great skills through that. And then after that, I was like, okay, I need to be a part of the small team that goes to the big team. And so I kind of set my sights on how can I figure out, the right path to get there, what company, and how could I be a part of building that.
So is that where kind of the taste for all this startup scene came from? Because I feel like a lot of college students I talk to, they don't know this ecosystem exists aside from maybe the Silicon Valley. Is that where that came from, working at that co-working space?
Totally, 100%. Like I would have never had any clue like what technology or start, like a thing like WeWork, like this, being able to come to an event here and be like, wow, some people work and they're not chained to their desk. They don't wear a suit. They're working on something cool. They're working on something that's like brand new. I would have had no idea. So I think places like WeWork like this, amazing. And I think the fact that startups are a little bit more popular at this point, people understand that there is a tech scene in Washington. It's not just politics. I think it's growing, and I think what it takes is a lot of successful companies. I think people forget that like AOL almost basically invented the internet, but for some reason no one thinks of DC as an internet type of city, which is unfortunate. And I think it'll take more and more companies doing well, continuing to sustain, and have a lot of jobs and be the employer, because government contracting, there's a lot of jobs there. So people pretty quickly get pulled into that. Yeah. And I think it'll take some big tech companies that do well to make DC make a little transformation.
Cool. Has there been somebody, it could be an American University, it could have been this internship, has there been somebody or some experience that you would credit to you sitting in this chair tonight, that, you're working at Social Tables, CMO, 26 years old? What was that person or experience?
Yeah, so at Affinity Lab, there was a guy named Philippe. He was the CEO of Affinity Lab. Awesome guy. He was really ingrained in the tech scene, and he made Affinity Lab very much a tech-oriented kind of ecosystem before there was like a real place for a lot of tech people. And I was working for him, and he was telling me about all the companies that were going on within Affinity Lab and how they work and what they're trying to do. And he was teaching me about things like Y Combinator when before, like as that was like starting, and I was learning about it, and I was doing like a research project for him around like Techstars and Y Combinator and all these really amazing like accelerators and incubators, and like helping Affinity Lab understand like should they try to do something similar. And so I immersed myself in it, and I was like, this is it, like this is incredible. And so he actually he had a startup of his own that I helped out with. He let me like help out with certain things here and there. And I was like, holy cow, like you can have a serious impact if you're an early employee. Yeah. And so he kind of opened my eyes to it, let me kind of tinker on some stuff that he was building himself. Yeah. And then obviously helped me kind of with my next kind of internship from there. Sure.
So it sounds like a lot of those was destined, or rainbows and butterflies. Everything was great. And a lot of people I've interviewed, both in the book and these people I sit down with, it's all perfect when I pull it out of them. But was there a moment that you were like, this internship sucks, or this class sucks, or I went down this path, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were originally going to do finance, yeah. Right? So was there a moment that you were like, this sucks, or I took a risk and it didn't work out?
Totally, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of horror stories. There's a lot of scars along the way. I'm happy to share those too, if that's more interesting to people. But I think it all looks like it makes sense, and probably part of that is because it's a lot of like, it's just all baby steps, right? Like my job at Affinity Lab like wasn't that impressive. Like 50% of my job was managing the office space. Like I wasn't like this like crazy like research Einstein running around building business plans. Like I was doing a lot of stuff that wasn't exactly like sexy or fun. Same thing at Living Social. Like, yeah, I got to handle a couple cool projects, but what I actually got to do was like experience the business and see the things going on around me. And like I had some grunt work, internship stuff that I would have to fight through. And then at Social Tables, I think Social Tables, you know, my real career and my real learning are from Social Tables. And that was like, you know, every time you're about to raise money, you're like, okay, well, if we don't raise money, we're out of money. So it's been great. So those are always terrifying. And like, you're always making mistakes. Like I can think back to projects, initiatives, campaigns that I rolled out that just totally flopped. And at the time, you kind of brush it off and have to keep going. And like, you look at a few things, like if that would have went a little bit left or a little bit right, like who knows what could have happened. So, you know, for me, I think those things are like, if you're not aware and you're not learning from when you're failing, you could get down a course that's not great. I think the key thing is like, be aware of when you're failing, like that's totally fine. And just, if you're learning from that, you'll be a rock star, I think.
Cool, thank you for sharing. A lot of, when we polled our community and some things that they want to talk about, specifically this is very startup-based, marketing-based conversation, but there's some people that are working in education, there's some people that are doing traditional internships, and they're like, they want to know from you, like, what is it like to work for a startup? And you've alluded to it, right? If you get to the end of your runway, you're like, all right, we need to figure out a way to keep going. Or if Don wakes up one day, maybe changes the course of the company. So what is it like, take away Social Tables, what do you think it's like, if you were to answer that question, what is it like to work for a startup?
Yeah, and all startups are going to be different. So hopefully if I say something that you like and you go work at a startup and it's terrible, just take this with a grain of salt. But I think working at a startup, depending on the size, so I would categorize a lot of companies that are like 200 employees, they're still a startup because they still might not be profitable and they still might be trying to figure out their true kind of business model. And I would say don't get like tricked into thinking a company is like a startup because they have like a cool office or they raise funding. Like some people want to like build a startup as in like the Silicon Valley show on HBO, like something like that. Like that's what they want to do. And then some people want to build like real businesses and like impact real customers and real industries. I would say like if you can find a company that really wants to actually be like a permanent thing and it's not somebody's like weird idea that they had that happened to get a little traction. And I think those types of businesses, people have really terrible startup experiences, like horrific startup experiences. I got lucky enough, Social Tables was like, we want to build like a lasting company. We want to grow a true business. And so what that ends up looking like is you work a ton of hours, but you don't realize it and you don't mind. You are working with really, really smart people that are on your team and like have your back probably more so than like maybe your own family has in certain situations, which is like really unbelievable. I think a lot of people go to work and they're like, oh yeah, there's Bob in cubicle 5. Can't stand him, but I have lunch with him every Thursday. And like, they're not like, oh yeah, I'm going to get Bob's back and I'm going to work till midnight if Bob needs my help. You know what I mean? So I think startups, it's like almost like this weird shift where it's like, now you have coworkers that are like they feel like quasi family. You're spending more time with them than your real family. And you're probably like failing at 9 out of the 10 things you're trying to do at this startup, right? Because most things don't work, like most businesses fail. So you're always you're hitting like brick walls. You're running into stuff. You're like, oh, this is totally insurmountable. There's no way that we can get over this hurdle to continue on. And then you're like, oh, we found this little path around it. All right, we're fine. Okay, doomsday's over. It's noon. You guys ready to get lunch? And it's a serious roller coaster. And I think it's hard if you have think about your own instincts and it's like fight or flight. If you're a flight type of person, startup's gonna be really anxiety provoking because there's gonna be a lot of things that are yelling out like, run, leave. Like this isn't going well. This isn't gonna work. It's too expensive to acquire our customers. Our revenue's dipping. And so it's like very tumultuous, but like when you win, it's unbelievable because you literally were the reason that your company succeeded. And that's really rare. Like most people are in a company and it's like, if I don't show up for 2 weeks, my boss won't know and nothing will happen to this place. And that's a pretty big demotivator for a lot of people. And so I think if you get into a startup and you're literally the fuel that's, propelling that rocket ship, that's like, you get addicted to that really fast. So you'll get to learn a lot. You'll be handed projects that seem way bigger than you should ever get. You'll be handed projects that are way bigger than you realize they are, and you won't even have any idea until like maybe 12 months later, you're like, oh my God, they let me put together the pitch deck. Like, I was just putting together slides, having a good time, and then like we raised money from that. Like, holy cow.
It's a direct contribution and you feel tied to that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think like that feeling, like if you want that sort of like, you want your life and work to be that much of a symbiotic relationship. Not everybody should, not everybody does want that. But if you do, and you want to integrate like growing professionally with growing personally, I think startups are maybe one of the only ways to do it because they're investing in you because they need you. You're investing in the company because it needs you, and it's like the company's paying you back in skills and you're paying the company back in effort. And I think it's like really, really amazing if you can get into a good spot like that.
So before we start to wrap it up, there's about 3 different kind of keywords that I'd like to try to hit on in the next 10 minutes so you talk about the leadership. And I think a lot of people might find their niche and then leave it because the leadership or the boss is just awful. So they found what they want to do, but in the wrong organization. Where does, and what you said, like a startup could be a cool office space, but it necessarily isn't good leadership, good culture, et cetera. Where does this leadership come from Social Tables?
So I think from a Social Table standpoint, I think people just, our founding kind of early team just genuinely cares about people. We all genuinely care about like the experience that people have, employees have. We genuinely care that people like where they're working. And I think we think that if you don't take care of employees, your employees won't take care of your customers. And so like that kind of line of thought sets people up for success, I think. And it's in most startups that succeed, I think it's very similar. That people understand that like employees are critical. Like in a startup of 100 people, if 2 people leave the company for totally different reasons, like you're in a hole. Like that's hard. That's a hard gap to fill. If you're at a larger company and 2 people leave, it's not a big deal. But at a startup, it's like, holy cow, all hands on deck. That person just is moving to like Australia because their wife got a job there, and this, so it's really, so you have to really genuinely want to keep that really high performing team and keep people happy. So it's like, I think it's like a non-starter. If you don't have a leadership team that's ready to do that, I think it's kind of tough. Has
there been something that Don has directly or indirectly influenced to you because you were like number 4, 5, 6 on Social Tables? So has there been something that he's impacted on you that you carry out with your team or with Social Tables culture?
I mean, probably everything. To be totally honest, right? Like I joke when we've hired other people in the executive team, I have this secret advantage of Don taught me how to work, so I work really well with Don. Like everything how I kind of work and operate is like a little bit molded around like what worked well for him. So I think that's kind of like a little bit of an advantage that I have. So I think it'd be easier to tell you like what I don't do, because like a lot of what I do is like him helping me coach and understand like, I went from not really ever having a manager to like managing people, and you're kind of like flying with instinct at that point. And so there's a lot of like people helping coach around that and be like, hey, think about this, or you got to do this, or watch out for that, look out for this. So I think most of it, all of it, I got from Social Tables and Don.
Cool. What do you guys look for? Because I think that was the second question that we kind of garnered is, what do you specifically look for, or what does a startup look for specifically with an entry-level position?
Sure. So I think the biggest one for us is like the ability to learn. If you can show that you've had multiple times in your life where or maybe even one role where you've had to learn something new continuously and you've gotten really good at it really fast, I think that's important for a startup because the startup's really dynamic. So the customer you're going after might change, or the industry might change, or the marketing channel that works might change, or the sales pitch might change. So if you struggle with learning something new quickly and becoming an expert, startups are kind of difficult because it's so dynamic that what you're an expert in this week, you actually might not need to be an expert in next month. And I think that makes it hard if you're like a specialist, right? Like if you're like, hey, I'm the best search engine optimization person in DC, I want to work at Social Tables, it might not be the right fit yet because we're not big enough to just only need that. And so we need someone that's like, hey, I'm really, really awesome at this, but I've only been doing it for 2 years, and 2 years before that I was doing this and this and this, and like here's how I've continued to learn and evolve. So like to me, the ability to learn is huge, and just being able to show that is a really big deal.
How could somebody communicate that in an interview, in an application, in a resume? How could a college student maybe communicate that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna dig in a little bit to my marketing role, but I think the key with the job is similar to marketing for products or customers, where show them that you know what's going on in their world and tell them how you're gonna help them before they even tell you what their problem is, and they'll be stunned, right? If you're really amazing at something and you email them, you could even email someone about a job listing that they don't have posted and just say, hey, based on the size of your company, the industry you're in, your customers, here's my skill set, and I have a feeling that you're probably struggling with X, Y, and Z, and here's what I can do for you around that. You'd be surprised at how often people are like, holy cow, A, they didn't think that person existed, or B, they just hadn't posted the job. Like most startups, like if the job posting is up, they needed someone 2 months ago. So like if you see that job posting, they really need it, but like they're trying to hire and recruit before they can get stuff out the door. So I think it's just really about like positioning, like really like, hey, I understand where you're at. You're a company this size, you're probably running into this, you might be looking at this channel, or you might be looking at this tactic, or you might need someone in HR to do this. I could help you streamline, and I could run through 4 phone screens a day, and I could get you 2 candidates like every week or something, right? If you're like gonna be in recruiting. So I think you gotta kind of go out on a leap, and at the very least they'll be like, oh wow, well we don't have that, we used to have that problem, we don't have it anymore, but if you're smart enough to know that, let's talk.
Yeah, I think, and you probably agree with this, is there's several ways that we can go about that, whether we're a college student or in the middle or end of our career spectrum, because we could follow Don and see what he's tweeting about and what gets his interest and where his thoughts are going. You could also probably read about social tables in a variety of mediums, and you could also just see where the trend of startup and tech is going and probably make a few assumptions, right? There's just so much ways that you can do your research on a company or a department. Yeah. So let's do like 3 or 4 rapid fire questions, and I'd love to turn, because there's always questions from the audience and things that we might have not have hit on. So I heard this 2 years ago when we were writing the book, is you need to have a grandma-friendly version of what you do, right? Because it might be tough to explain. So how would you describe to your grandparents what you do for a living?
Yeah. I think I've probably done this really poorly over the years, so maybe if I get this right, I'll tell her again. So in my role now, really what I do is I help manage the team that's making sure that we get our products out to the market to get customers. Like at the end of the day, like I would love to say I'm like hands-on with a lot of stuff, but I'm unfortunately I'm classified as overhead right now, which is not a good thing, not a cool thing, by the way. Managing in management. But yes, I would say I'm managing the team that makes sure we get customers.
Cool. What is your take right now, April 2017, on the pulse of the DC tech world?
I think it's awesome. I think we're seeing a lot of companies that maybe started 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and they're still around. They're still doing really well. They're getting big. You have companies that are kind of sustaining. They're not vaporizing. They're not an idea being pitched at DC Tech. These are like real businesses with real customers. Yes, they probably have problems. Yes, Silicon Valley might be scaling more companies faster than us, but we're starting to build out some really impressive companies that are here to stay. And I think people don't really realize that. Like, I think there's a company called Affinity. They're going to IPO soon, $1.6 billion market cap. It's a sales software. No one's probably ever heard of them. 500 employees based out of DC. We had Cvent, which went public and then got acquired. So that's also a global company, very large, multi-billion-dollar market cap. You have people like Optoro, who are raising tons of money, or sorry, not raising tons of money. They recently raised money from strategic investors, but they're also doing well. They're very large. You have companies like Upside Travel, which are also new, but they came in and right out of the gate with like a $50 million round of funding, an incredible management team that's like started and scaled businesses before. So that's really rare. And I think there's a lot of like, we're seeing like a lot of kind of like flagship startups popping up that are kind of here to stay. You have like Video Blocks in Reston, amazing company. They've been around for a really long time. They're a tech company, and they're awesome. They have an awesome team as well. So I think there's like really, really good companies that are here to stay, which I think is a big difference than before.
Cool. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. What would you tell college students? So that, as we've alluded to, there's a few in the audience. What would be the best piece of advice you could tell them? We have a lot of recent grads at Social Tables, and I think one of the things that I see most often with people that come right out of school is they have this overwhelming fear, and I don't know what causes it. If somebody studied psychology, let me know. But there's this overwhelming fear that whatever they're doing today, or whatever their role is today, if it's not exactly what they want to be doing in their vision for their career in the next 40 years, that they're like terrified to do it and they shouldn't do it, and they're not sure that it's a good thing, and they're not sure that they're learning enough or the right things or this or that or the other. And it's like, take a breath. Like, no, your first job is not your career forever. And it's like, I think one of the fears, maybe, I'm going to take a guess, is like you put on your LinkedIn profile and then all of your friends see what you do, and then they compare, like, is my job cooler than their job? Is my company cooler than their company? And then it's like, am I getting promoted faster than my friends? Like, what's going on? And it's like this live feed, like this live reader board of like who's doing better professionally. And so I think people are so nervous, like, oh, like I don't want to be in HR, but I got this HR job. Like, oh, now I'm really upset. And it's like, no, somebody's paying you to learn how to work. Like, you don't even know how to work yet. I think like you're not even sure like how to send emails internally, to be totally honest. So like love that fact. And I think it's like, it's not this like end all be all, like if I take this job, my life's over. I'm gonna be in HR forever, and I don't even want to be in HR, and like I don't even know what that is. And it's like, no, like you can move and do so many things. Like, it's literally unbelievable how many opportunities you have. So like I would optimize for learning. I would take a lower salary. I would optimize for where I think I could learn the most. I would look at who is going to be my manager, and like, does that person have a great track record, trajectory, and like, I would go for that. I would optimize for learning at a like straight out of school, whatever that looks like. How do you do that? Look at the manager or person you're going to look for, because I talk about that advice too. But how do we do that?
Yeah, I think once you get into your kind of like job role, I think one of the again, when you come straight out of school, you're just like, oh my, give me the job. And I think you can think about it as like 50% of that interview is for the company to understand you, and 50% of that interview is for you to understand the company. So like, don't be afraid to say like, I'd like to ask some questions, like, am I allowed to talk to my potential manager? Like, I have a list of questions that I'd love to ask them because I want to see how we would work together. If you ask that to an HR person on the phone, they'd be like, holy cow, this person knows what they're doing. Like,
and what would be a question or two they should ask if they get that opportunity?
Sure. So I would say, like, what could I do in this role to like be as helpful to you as possible? Like, I don't know if anybody here manages a team, but if someone got on a phone call and was like, hey, I'd love to know what I could do here to like make your life amazing, that manager would be like, well, here's 10 things I need to get done. And like, I think that's really helpful. So just understanding the role based on the person who's going to be like measuring your success and mentoring you, I think is really helpful.
Great. Last question before we turn it over to you guys. There's a lot of people that have worked the traditional corporate route or followed their career advice or listened to their parents, and now they hear somebody like you talk about, they get a taste of this startup life and they see a WeWork. How do they transition out of they're in HR but they want to do marketing, or they're in marketing and they want to do something else? What would be your last piece of advice to somebody making a career transition?
Yeah, I would say don't worry about your LinkedIn. If you were a director of sales and you want to get into marketing, and so you take 2 steps back and you go to a smaller company and you take a pay cut and you take a title cut, but you want to get into marketing, like that's just kind of probably what you have to do. And if you're only set on like, well, I'm here and I get paid this and this is what I do, a lot of people probably could make the transition and be horizontal and go over there. But I think a lot of people are afraid because they're like, well, now I'm 5 years out of school and I have this title and this salary and I can't give it up. Like I don't want to give it up. And I would say joining a startup's risky, getting into a new industry is risky, but if you really want to do that, it'll pay off in spades. So like, okay, if you take a salary bump, adjust your lifestyle, like be willing to invest in yourself. So maybe instead of going and paying $200,000 for an MBA, like take a $40,000 decreased salary for 5 years and invest that $200,000 in yourself via not taking a higher salary. Don't get an MBA, but move careers. Because most people go get an MBA, pay $200,000 and then move to a new industry or move to a new department. Just take a pay cut and move over and work your way up in 4 or 5 years and have zero debt and be where you would be when you came out of school. So
that might be one of the best sound bites and pieces of advice that we've gotten so far. Like that's really tangible and tactable. Any last parting words that you would want to impart on everybody listening, watching, etc., before we turn to Q&A?
Yeah, you don't have to work at a startup to love your job. A lot of people make it seem that way. That's not true at all. I think big companies have a lot of great parts to them. Specifically, you can probably, if it depends on, so I would say, think about how you learn, be really honest with yourself with how you truly learn and figure new things out. And if the way you learn is by figuring things out and failing and falling on your face and getting back up and doing it again and you kind of learn that way, startups are perfect. If you're the type of person that doesn't actually learn well that way, like just realize that and maybe build a skill set somewhere else before you would start a company or join a startup, because I think it's really painful if you're not that type of person and you do go to a startup. I think that's tough. So I think bigger companies are also, you can have incredible careers, work with incredible people, work on amazing projects, get to touch lots of customers, do really amazing things and get a totally different skill set. So I think my takeaway would be you don't have to work at a startup to really love what you're doing or love your team or love your company.
Cool. How can people connect with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, so my email,
somewhere up there.
My email is Trevor, Trevor, @socialtables.com. Email me anytime about anything, totally genuine. Some people take me up on it and most people don't. So don't worry if you think my inbox is overflowed, it's not. And my Twitter is just Trevor H. Lynn. So happy to talk to you on there via email, via phone call, happy to introduce you to whoever, connect with me on LinkedIn. If I'm connected to a company that you're interested in working for or want an intro to, like I'm happy to make that introduction. Plenty of people gave me plenty of introductions along the way, so happy to help out whatever.
This is how we wound up here tonight, because Heidi right here, who's in the front row, we were looking for speakers for our conference. You discovered Social Table. Well, I knew Social Tables. You connected with him, and I think a couple emails and a phone call. We obviously built this relationship. So, Trevor, give it up for Trevor. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. I really love to spend 5, maybe 10 minutes. There might be some questions you're dying to ask Trevor that we didn't get to. So, who'd like to go first?
You're incredibly self-aware. How do you may not even know how you've cultivated it, but like the personal development piece is obviously big to you. Was there someone who set the example, or where do you think it comes from?
Thank you. So, Social Tables were my first real jobs. I was managing a team. I did my first 360 feedback, and the feedback I got was, "You're not self-aware." So I would essentially, like, I would walk in the morning, go straight to my seat, wouldn't really say hi to anyone, heads down, headphones in, just start doing work, literally do work all day long, leave. And I think really underestimate the elements around me. And like, I was just so much in like a get things done mode that I really deprioritized and devalued how important it is to like talk to your teammates, ask people how they're doing, get to know them personally. And it's not because like I didn't care, it was just like I have so much to do, I can't talk, sorry, I just have to do this. And so I really got that feedback, and that feedback was hard because it was like, wow, no, I care about these people so much. I really do like want to know how they're doing and what's going on, and I do want to be collaborative. And so when I finally realized like, okay, I need to really check how I come off to people, because I can come off very intimidating, or I can come off like I don't want to talk to them. And I think that's really, really bad for pretty much everything in life, other than just going and getting work done. So I was like, wow, this probably applies to my personal life too. And I think it did. And so I've just constantly worked at it. I think I'm kind of like an introvert naturally. So I know that I have to push myself to go like get up out of my seat, go around, talk to people, see what's going on, get a feel for how everyone's doing. And yeah, that wasn't easy, but it's something that I've definitely 100% consciously worked on, and people on my team have pushed me on as well. So it's been a total like 5-year transformation, I would say.
You're doing good.
Thank you.
Great question.
What do you see yourself doing after Social Tables? Because you're the CMO right now. But would you see yourself working in a different industry besides?
Sure. So the question was, what do I see myself doing after Social Tables? I don't know. I think for me, Social Tables is still an incredible opportunity. Like I'm still lucky to be there. Like I don't, technically the company has a board, and technically the board can fire people. So like I'm not set in stone, right? So I think for me, I'm still learning a ton. I have a lot of opportunities to do new things. Like as the company grows, the team grows, our tactics change. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning a ton. So, and when that runs out, maybe I'll have a better answer for you. But I think for now, I really enjoy it, and my head's not past it yet. Yeah.
Well, first of all you guys on social media and kind of business crushing social media.
Thank you.
Being here. So as a marketing professional in the B2B space, what were some assumptions you made in the beginning of your career that were false about specifically the B2B marketing?
Yeah, so the question was, what are some of the things in the B2B marketing world that are kind of like false that most people probably take as truth? I think for us, one of the things, and it's worked out to our advantage, and it wasn't even really conscious, is that in the B2B world, one of the things that's like critical is that your industry and your customers like feel like they know you and they genuinely care about like you versus another company. And I think one of the things that we got lucky, our industry is the hospitality industry. It's very people oriented, very relationship driven. And so our company and like our founder, and we're just naturally like, we want to talk to people, meet our customers and be out there. And then that ended up being like our brand, and it stuck. And so we have this really great brand in our industry around, we care about our customers, we're there for our customers, we help our customers, we don't nickel and dime our customers, we genuinely want to improve our industry, we genuinely want to contribute to the success of our customers and our industry. And it helps because a lot of marketing looks kind of bad, right? You're like, hey, here's some free information, give us your email, we're going to email you a lot. And a lot of people like don't like that experience. So I think the more that you can like be genuine and like be a person, like your company is a bunch of people, and like your support team and your sales team, like that's what your customers know. So like if you're the CEO or you're on the executive team and you're just like hanging out in the back and you think you're the company and the brand, like you're not at all. Like if you talk to a customer like, oh yeah, like Meredith, she was like, if you meet one of your customers like, oh, Meredith, she was amazing, she's incredible, I love her, I would never leave her. Like they don't know who anyone else is. And so I think for us, putting a lot of value on like NPS, Net Promoter Score, was a big deal. And really wanting, like our positive word of mouth is unquantifiable, unfortunately, but it is a huge part of why we get customers and huge part of why customers come back. So unfortunately, you can't truly measure it, but I think it's like a company-wide kind of cultural thing that people get behind. But if they do, it's like, it's unbelievable. Super like network effect, massive magnitudes of like awareness that you couldn't pay for. Yep.
So I'm an Affinity Labs alum. Also was at a startup before, so it's funny that you say Affinity Labs is
Yeah.
no longer around on Main Street, unfortunately. What gets you up every morning? It's hard being at a startup and you spend several hours there and you don't really leave your work at work. You
Yeah.
take home with you, so what keeps you up? Yeah,
So the question is, what keeps me motivated? What gets me up in the morning to keep doing the startup stuff? I think. I'm still like learning a ton. Like I'm not going in like a robot and kind of clocking in. I couldn't go in with my eyes closed and do my job. And there's things that are always changing. Our customers are changing. What their needs are, what they're asking for is changing. We're rolling out new products. How do you market new products? I have no idea. I have to figure that out right now. Literally, it's not a joke. So if you have tips for that, let me know. But like you're doing all these like brand new things for the first time. And so I just haven't hit that world yet where I'm like, oh, it's the start of the year. Let's repeat everything and kind of like make it happen. So, lucky for me, being in that growing company, you have the ability, like every year is way different. The goals are way different. The tactics are way different. What you're doing is totally new. So I think I got lucky with that. So that's still tons of fun.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
So at the beginning, you obviously wear many hats.
Mm-hmm.
Small team, all have to help each other do a lot. But once you grew to the size you are now, is there a point along the way where you're like, I'm going to keep this marketing hat on, kind of stay here and things are more siloed? Or is it still like that for you guys?
That's a great question. So he's asking, when you start, you're wearing a lot of hats, you're doing a lot of different things. But at some point, did I choose to kind of stay one course? And so that decision ends up getting made. I think when you start to need to hire in heads of departments, or you realize that a role is getting too big and you really can't sacrifice on the deliverables. So it's in any department or any role, but if you realize, holy cow, this is actually 2 roles in one, and if we want to do both really well, we need to hire another person. Usually if you're at a startup, you kind of get to pick which one of those ways do you want to go, and then you can keep doing that along the way. So for me, I had multiple decisions, right? It was do I want to be in marketing? Okay, do I want to learn paid marketing? Do I want to manage people, or do I want to keep doing marketing on my own? Do I want to work with and have the sales team? Do I not want to do that? Do I want to take that responsibility on or not? So usually you make that pick, and if you don't want to do it, then you're going to help hire someone in or promote someone within to take it on. And it's definitely hard because you want to you built it, you want to own everything, you want to keep your hands on all the stuff that you originally did. And I think the key moment, or that really helpful piece, is when you realize that the fact that you're holding onto that thing makes it, you're probably doing really subpar work. You don't realize it because it's the same as it's always been. It's just as good as it's always been. And then you realize wow, wait a second. If somebody did this 24/7, it would be 10 times better. And then you finally realize that, you're okay, yeah, we have to hire someone. Because you don't realize it, but you're slowing the team down because you're holding on to these projects, you're trying to do way too much, when in reality, someone's probably better at it than you, and they would dedicate more time to it. So I think the moment that finally clicked for me, it's a big shift, but it's really important. Yeah.
You touched on the aspects that you kind of love the most. On the flip side, what are the pieces that you dislike?
Sure. Yeah. So question, talked about a lot about the good things. What are some things that I don't like? So, oh man.
We can turn the cameras off.
Yeah. Depending on what I say, we might edit this out. No. I think one of the hard things about a startup, specifically with this stage that we're in, is that you have this culture of people where people are really kind of have their personal identity almost intertwined with the company. And it becomes really difficult when people from an early stage start to leave. So whether they leave because the company got too big and they don't like the structure, or they leave because they had an incredible role and that gave them the skill sets to go somewhere else. I think you have this it's a really tough kind of cultural thing that you have to balance and figure out how to manage, where you have these people that are literally if people in the company think about the company and they think of that person's face, and then all of a sudden that person's hey, it's my time to kind of get out of here. I think that's really, really tough to manage, because from a cultural standpoint, it's this almost that person's almost a cultural artifact, and you're just kind of taking it out of the office, and you're hiring in someone new and integrating that new person. So I think you get to this stage, and I think to me the reason I don't like that is because it's always tough. Those people are your really good friends, and if it doesn't work out with them, I think it's really hard, and it's hard to balance. You kind of have to get over it, and that's not fun. So I think it's that managing the people kind of coming in and out, people that have done great things and are leaving. It's always really, really tough to balance, and it's tough on morale for the team. So how do you keep people understanding that thinking past that person, thinking past 12, 18 months, hey, for Social Tables in 24 months, yeah, this is going to hurt for 4 or 5, but if you think a little bit farther on down the line, things will be okay. And that's just a lot of emotional conversations that you have to have, and that's tiring. So I think that's tough. Not necessarily I don't like it, I think it's a really tough part of the job.
That's it. Let me make one more announcement. But first of all, thank you guys for coming out and your attention and enthusiasm to kind of engage here with Trevor. But he's obviously given your email, his email, and I know we'll be around here for the next 15, 20 minutes, chit-chatting, cleaning up, etc. So feel free to come up to us. Between now, we're taking a little break, so we're not doing our next one until June 6th, which will be at WeWork Wonder Bread. I would highly recommend, if you've never been to the Wonder Bread WeWork, We're specifically doing it in the summer because it's got a beautiful veranda, outside area where we're hoping to do the actual interview, and we're doing it with Stacy Campisi, who's a good friend of mine and a life and business coach who's really gotten me to where I am, but she's really kind of putting a new spin on this executive coaching term and professional development. So anybody that's kind of stuck in your life, or it might be you, I would highly recommend coming, because we'll be actually talking about a lot of these tactics of like how to become self-aware. And so that's June 6th, and we're headed to New York City after that for another one. But I thank you guys so much, and any way that me or Trevor, I think, can help connect you anywhere here in DC, we'd be more than happy to. So thank you again for your attention, for coming out, but have an excellent rest of your week.